Hello, my name is Dan Humberg, and this is an instructional video from harvestfires.com. If you're watching this, you may be considering or needing to do the tin preparation for a fire stop kit on your combine harvester or on somebody's combine harvester. This video is designed or is intended to show you how to prepare the tin for the enclosure that goes around the hot exhaust components on a Case model 9240 combine. It should also serve on a 9250 combine. I believe that the exhaust systems, at least the parts that I deal with, are the same on those two models. It's also quite similar to the 8240 and 8250, although the last part of the there are some components in the tin kit that are different. If you're looking for more detail on how to fold the tin, I actually do a full fold set on an 8240 or 8250, and you may be able to find that video linked again from the Harvest Fires website. This one, I'm going to show you a set of tin that's already been folded, and then I'll show you how to assemble it together into the enclosure. We're not on the combine, obviously, and there will be another video that you can watch to see exactly how the individual pieces fit on the combine and give you some pointers as to how to overcome challenges there when you're installing it on the machine. So this is intended to help with the 9240 or 9250 and the preparation of the tin set. Before I begin, I always make this cautionary statement that this kit is the fire stop kit is intended to stop the chronic or endemic fires that occur in volatile crops, particularly in sunflowers, where people tend to experience smolders very, very frequently. Our research at the university indicated that the vast majority of those fires start at the exhaust system with the volatile dust that comes from the sunflower plant. And this kit is very effective at stopping that ignition process. However, I have to caution you that I cannot guarantee that you will never have a smolder or a fire on your combine. There can be a number of different sources that would ignite dust or material on the combine. You can have a hot bearing, you can have an electrical short, you can have an alternator that's failing, you can throw a rock through somewhere that makes a spark. There's even questions about static electricity that I'm still working on trying to understand that better. If you have a source for ignition beyond the exhaust system, this system will not protect against that. Having said that, this is very effective at protecting the exhaust components, and the feedback that I get from people that have used it is that it eliminates those chronic smolders that they had experienced in the crop. But be aware that you could still have a fire, and you need to be careful as a result of that. Okay, you're looking down at my bench surface here, and we're going to do the work on the top of this and do an assembly of that tin kit for that combine. I want to talk about tools for a minute and some of the methods that I use to fold the tin. Most of this tin, or all of this tin, is cut from 24 gauge galvanized steel. It's relatively ductile or bendable, and it's rather thin, but when it's screwed together into an enclosure, it's rigid enough to protect the machine. However, where there are bends that need to be made for flanges or edges or corners or whatever, I have the CAD system has helped me design it so that we have perforated cuts here. We have essentially like a dotted line, and the laser will cut the part out, but it will also cut that dotted line where we want to make that bend, and that makes the tin prefer to bend at that location. It makes it much easier to bend. About half the material has been cut there, cut through there, so that you can bend it much more easily. Many of the bends you can make with your hands. In fact, most of them you probably could make with your hands. It might just not be quite as neat as if we use some tools. Also, the pilot holes for the screws have been cut. The large pilot holes are the piece that's going to go, the screw is going to go through first, and then there's a smaller pilot hole in the background that will capture the screw and pull it together. All of the parts should have a number cut through them. This particular one, it would be on this flange. Now, the guy that cut my laser, or did my work for me on this particular set, we had something set wrong on his laser, and it eliminated the characters or the numbers. So I've got the underscore that I put under it to help know which way the number was oriented, but the numbers are missing. But the ones you get should have a number, and that's actually the number of the part. That's the number I'll talk about. Now the guys that cut it have also put a number with a Sharpie on here, so this is C94 for 9240 and 001 is the part number, so it's part number 1 in the kit. Anyway, we're going to bend these up from flat. You will bend them up from flat sheet pieces. I've already done that, but the flat pieces will have perforations where the bends are going to take place. I have several tools that I use. This is a vice grip sheet metal tool. You can buy it at a hardware store. I bought this one at Runnings. There's a wider one. This is about 6-inch sheet metal tool. Really handy for this work. This one I bought at Harbor Freight, but you can probably find it at another hardware store too. I use a small flat. This is a parallel jaw pliers. It really is nice for doing some of the finer things that I do, but most of this you could do with the common pliers as well, a regular small pliers. One like this. You can do mostly the same thing. This one is a smooth jaw, so it doesn't really chew up the metal at all. This one has little teeth on it, I guess. I do have a tin snips here because once in a while we find that there's something that needs to be adjusted on the kit. Usually that means that it's in a place where there's some variability on the combines, like the lines, oil lines that go to and from the turbocharger bearing. Sometimes there are places where the kit just may not fit perfectly on there and you may have to trim to fit around a support piece or something like that. So you may want a tin snips, a good one if you can have one handy. The assembly is done with number 2 square drive pan head sheet metal screws. They're half inch long, I think. These are self-drilling, self-tapping screws. Most of the holes are already drilled, so we don't have to drill them through themselves, but it makes them go in really easy. And if you do have one where we missed it or something happened where the hole isn't there, you can actually shoot this through as it is. It's just helpful to have the pilot holes prepared for us. So number 2 square drive bits are what we're going to use to drive the screws. Most of it I do with this drill driver. If you can get a smaller one, it's really handy when you're doing the installation. Here on the bench it doesn't matter a lot. I like this Milwaukee square driver bit, works really well. I also have a small tool that I don't need so much for this assembly, but you do need it on the combine, and I'll provide one with your kit if you purchase the kit. So there are some times when we have to reach underneath blind where you can't see it. There's a lot of junk on the engine in the way. You have to reach underneath in a tight space and put a screw in, and this is the only thing that'll do it. There is no driver that you can buy short enough generally to do that, so I make these and provide them with a kit. Yours will either be aluminum like this or a wooden handle. I also have a long extension. This is made from a piece of electric fence rod with the drill driver bits pressed into a hole in the end and epoxied in there, and it helps when you're doing a long reaching for one that's too far back in to get with a conventional bit. I also have a 6-inch extension or a 6-inch square driver bit, and then here's a magnetic extension, and you could put 2 of these together and get the same result as this one. You also might consider magnetizing the tip if you can before you start, because it'll hold the screws a little bit better for you. So those are the tools that I use to do this. There's one other tool I want to point out. I can turn you just a little bit here. I have a post vise here in the corner next to my bench, but you can do this with a bench vise anywhere. I have a tool that I use for some of the longer bends. It's an angle iron. This one's just 1 inch by 1 inch by 1/8 angle iron with a 1.5 inch by 3/16 inch strap. That's got a bolt through each end. The overall unit is probably about 37 inches long, and the bolts at the end are not tight. You just keep them loose so that you can get a space in between here, and we can slip some of the long pieces of tin when we have a long bend to make, where it's a little harder to do it even with the perforated cuts. You can put the piece in there, line the perforated cuts up with the edge of the angle iron, clamp it in the vise tight, and then pull it over or push it over depending on the direction you need to go and make a crisper bend. You can also tighten up bends with, I've just got a small ball peen hammer here, but a hammer will tighten up those bends so that you get a crisper corner. If you got one that's a little round for some reason, you can do that. You can even do that while holding it with one of the hand tools. Just tighten up the bend a little bit with a ball peen hammer. So it's not necessary, but this is a handy tool to use for that. Or if you have a sheet metal brake, obviously you could do that. But if you don't have that, you can make one of these in 10 minutes. And the sizes that I used here are not really important. They were just handy materials. Okay, I have the first three parts here ready to review. The first one is the one I was holding here before. It has an underscore here, so it should probably have a number 1 on that flange. Flanges are the piece that bends around the edge of this. The face of the piece that kind of defines its shape is this face. So if you look at this, it's got a kind of a, I don't know what you call it, an expanding edge or expanding shape this way. In any case, all 4 of the flanges bend away from this face. Now it might look the same from this end. In fact, I'm not sure whether this would work. No, it won't work. Bent the other direction. You need to bend it the way that I've got it here. So down this, where this side tapers down to a narrower thing here, and I've got a wider flange, this 1.5 inch or so wide flange, that's going to bend down away from this face. So don't look at it this way, look at it this way. And regardless of whether there's a number here, look at this face, bend this down about 45 degrees. And then this flange gets bent again down this way about 45 degrees. Those are going to make a 90 in total when we assemble it. And this flange gets bent over again, same direction, but this one goes a little more than 90 degrees. It's actually it'll be about 101 degrees or something like that over. So a little bit past 90 degrees or past perpendicular. And this one on the bottom is just a little bit less than perpendicular. You can adjust these all by hand later, so it's not a big deal. When I put it together, if it doesn't fit right, you just bend it to adjust until it does fit, and then you put it together. But you need to get the direction of the bends correct. So looking at this face, 1, 2, 3, 4, bent away from this, 45, 45, about 100 degrees, and about 80 degrees. That's part number 1. Part number 2 also should have a number on this flange here, but there's an underscore, but the number's missing. Now this piece, when it's flat, you can kind of see what it's going to look like. It's going to have this wide flange with what I call a keyhole here in it, and then this piece, and then another narrower flange here. And I trimmed this one a little bit. I'll show you that in a little bit. Anyway, we're going to bend this wide flange down away from this face. So down that way, and then I've got this flange is going to bend down this direction, and again that's that same about 100 degrees, a little bit more than 90 degrees, so a little bit more than perpendicular. Then on this edge you'll have 3 tabs here. In this case the tin I'm using has perforations all the way along here. That's probably a mistake, or I'd like to fix that in the model. I would take the perforations out of this center one to indicate you don't bend that one. These other 2 about 3/8 inch tabs, we're going to bend up from this face with the keyhole. So we've started from this face and bent this down, and now we're going to bend those 2 tabs out 90 degrees. You can do those with a pliers or with that narrow sheet metal tool, but you bend them out 90 degrees. They're a little hard to do by hand because they're narrow, so you'll want to use a pliers or something there. Leave the center one flat and lined up. Don't bend that one. But what we're going to do is this is going to go in against the engine block. If the engine block were here and the exhaust manifold's here, this is going to wrap around the exhaust manifold, and this tab will go into a slot between the head and the block, and these are going to butt up against a raised bar on the casting of the boss and position this piece. There's a little tiny tab here on this end. That one you can bend around this way with us pliers. Okay, and this tab where the number should be on this one, we bend up or out from this space, but only a couple degrees, just a very little bit. That's going to help us remember to tuck a piece behind it later on. So piece number 2. This is piece number 3. There would be a 3 on this flange on the edge here, but then the underscore is there, but the number is gone. If you're looking at a flat part, it's kind of rectangular with a tab here, and then these 3 tabs here, and the keyhole in this piece. That keyhole on this one is not cut through, so I can't punch it out, but you would want to look at this face with the keyhole over here next to the tabs, and this tab on this end, not like this, but on this end, and you'd push that keyhole up just a little bit to start it out. We won't pull it out very far, just maybe 1/8 of an inch. And then we can look at the other bends for this one. We're going to take this about 3-inch flange and bend it down or these two this way, but again about 80 degrees or so, not quite 90 degrees. This little tab on the end of that with the number on it, now you're going to bend that up, but only a couple degrees, because that's going to help us remember to put something on top of it or up on this side of it. Then I've got this 1-inch flange up on this end, and that one we're going to bend down and around about, if you can see that, it's about 100 degrees, a little more than 90, about 10 or 11 degrees more than 90. So that's part number 3, and we've got that prepped, and let's put it together with 1 and 2. Part number 1 is kind of an end cap. It wraps around the end of part number 2. And you can see this little tab here. I'm slipping underneath that one and wrapping this around the bottom. You can always tell where you should be because of the size of the pilot holes. The big pilot holes are on the outside. I'm not going to put every screw in this kit. I won't, because I may eventually, but I'm not going to do it on the video because it takes forever. So I'm not going to, but you need to. And the reason you need to is because when you get on the machine to do the installation, you want all these holes pre-threaded. There's some that you can't reach except with this, and you really want that screw to find its way in very easily. And if you haven't finished cutting that hole, because that hole's a little undersized, it's really slow and hard to do it with that small tool. So you put these all together on the bench, and then you know that the holes are pre-threaded and fit. But once I put 2 screws in, all my other holes line up. Now I did have a tab on top that overlapped here, and I didn't like the way that it didn't have a hole in this one, so I trimmed this off. I just marked it with a Sharpie and cut it with a tin snips. This will all be covered up by the top piece here anyway, so don't worry about that. You can cut this off if you need to make this clear. The rest of it though fits really, really well. And we're going to take piece number 3. We're going to set it on top of this flange here, so that one's on the butt. So it goes like that, and these 2 flanges are on the outside, and again you can tell by the screw hole size which one is which, or which one is the outside one. Okay, parts 1, 2, and 3 assembled together. The screw holes that aren't filled yet line up, and you can put the rest of your screws in. I'm going to put one more in here so this one's more rigid. Set the clutch on your drill relatively low so that you don't strip out the holes, but that's the first 3 pieces put together. That brings us to pieces 4 and 5. Let me just say that this is going to go around my left, your right end of the exhaust manifold. This is the radiator end of your engine down here, and this is the first part of the exhaust manifold. This is going to wrap around it. We'll have a piece that will cover the top eventually too, but we aren't worried about that now. So this gets us up to where the turbocharger components are, and we need to enclose those. So we have 2 pieces that will help us do that. The first one is piece number 4. It should have a part number in this outer flange. It's missing on this one again. This is the bottom piece that goes underneath the, this cutout goes underneath the turbocharger bearing. This face of this reference face that we're going to look at, this goes up against the compressor, the air compressor that's part of your turbocharger. The exhaust turbine, the cast iron piece, is going to be over in here. The aluminum compressor housing is going to be over here, and this will butt right up against that. So you're looking at this face, look at the orientation, the shape, and everything. I've got 4 large pilot holes here. I've got 1 flange, 2 flange, 3 flange, 4 flanges, all of them bent 90 degrees away from this face. So they're going to bend under this way. I'll point out while we're doing this that these are cutouts for where the oil lines are going to enter and leave. This one is where the pressure oil line to the turbo bearing is going to come in. This is where the oil leaving the bearing is going to leave and go out the bottom. And there are finger cuts there so that we can adjust these, fit this nice and smooth around those lines when we get on the combine. Be sure and pay attention to that when you do the installation, that these are bent to be parallel to the line so that they don't rub on it with this hard laser cut surface. same thing around this one that supplies oil to the bearing. So that's the piece that goes underneath that turbocharger compressor. This is the top half. These two will mate together. Anyway, let's look at the bends on this one. It's almost the same. The top half, this goes around that turbocharger bearing. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 flanges, but 4 of the flanges, this one, this one, this one, and this one, are bent away from this face. Notice the shape of the face, and they bend them away. And then this flange is bent the opposite way, 90 degrees. We'll see why later on. But you have 1, 2, 3, 4 flanges to bend away from this face, 1 to bend up towards this face. Once we do that, we can put these together. I'm going to do that a little bit differently than we might expect to. Most of these parts we put the screws in to the enclosure from the outside to the inside. These actually are going to go through from the inside to the outside. And that's because the compressor or the turbocharger components make it very hard to reach these from the outside in. This one I just did is going to be in the front here, and it's going to be one where you may have to reach a long ways in behind the turbocharger to try and get that one in, but hopefully you'll be able to on the machine. So that's going to be the left side of or my left side, your right side of the turbocharger compressor. These 3 holes on the flange we just bent out this way will line up with those 3 here. And we can put that together now. Okay, I put 2 of 3 screws in there. You may not be able to reach this one on the combine. You may be, but you should be able to get these 2. Might even take a long bit going over the top of the bearing or squeezing in here, but you may be able to get these 2 and maybe that one, but I don't know. Anyway, that holds that piece together.
Hi. I'm inserting a little video clip here inside the rest of this as I'm editing it, because there's something I forgot to point out in the piece that we just worked with. That piece has a little hole. It's about the size of a nickel in the side of it. And when you put this together on the machine, you're going to find that there's a pneumatic actuator for the turbocharger, and it has a rubber hose line that it's a pressure, uses air pressure to change turbocharger geometry. Anyway, that line needs to come through that hole. You'll probably have to unclip the clamp on the line and then thread the line through that hole and back onto the actuator. But you want to look at that, and you want to make sure that the edge of the tin doesn't abrade or cut on that line. So again, that's one where you could potentially bend the tin or trim it more if you need to get farther away from the line. There's also one other part that's probably not discussed in the video. I think it's the highest numbered part in the set, probably like 18. It's a little circle about the size of a silver dollar, has a hole in it and some flower petal cuts from that center of that hole and 3 screw holes. The idea is that you can bend those petals out perpendicular to the face of that disc, and you can fit it around that hose so that it fits close around the holes, but with those flower petals parallel to the hose, so they won't rub on it or abrade on it or cut it. And then you can fit that around that hose, and then you can just shoot 1 or 2 or 3 screws through the sidewall and hold that flower petal piece there in place, and it can hold the hose right where it needs to be. Keeps anything from damaging it. So that's what those parts are, and that's what that hole is for, and that's what those parts are for. And so just be aware of that as you're doing the assembly. I forgot to talk about it when I was doing the bench assembly. So now we'll get back to the bench assembly process.
Next piece is number 9. Take it back, it's number 6. It will have a number, should be down on this flange, that's where the underscore is, but the number again is missing. So if this was flat, we would have a piece that's more or less rectangular with a wide flange here, a really wide flange here, and then some of these little 3/8 inch ones off this end. And here's the place where our pressure line to the turbocharger bearing is going to come through. So looking at that, we're going to bend this wide one with this corner, this notch up here. We're going to bend this one down this way, 90 degrees. We're going to bend this flange, about 1.5 inch wide flange. We're going to bend that up this way, not 90 degrees, but about what I've got shown here. That's about 70 degrees. And then these tabs, this one I finally got the perforation out of here. These two tabs bend down like that. This one you leave alone. This tab on the end, we bend, in this case, down, away from this face, but only a degree or two. So that, again, something else is going to lay on top of it. So that's piece number 6. This piece is going to go like this. All right, so I've got 2 screws here, and those will actually be, you'll have to screw them in from underneath the exhaust manifold when you get on the machine. And then these others will line up to screw in here. And I don't know whether you'll be able to reach all those on the combine or not, but if possible, we go from behind and screw them in like that. And so we start, this is going to go down behind the turbocharger exhaust turbine now. So that's piece number 6, and that's in place. Next, I've got 2 pieces I brought up. Piece number 7 is going to be more or less rectangular, with a long wide flange here near this oil cut, the line for the oil return line to come through. And this long wide flange is going to be bent up. It's going to fit under here, and so that will tell you the angle you need to match. It's going to fit in place there, so it will match the angle of this piece on the left. And then the outer flange, this one out here, which should have the number on it, they have the number 7 on it. That flange will be bent up 90 degrees. Once we've done that, we can put this together. Okay, I've screwed that in place. You can see here where that oil line is going to come through, and that oil line is about 3/4 of an inch in diameter. And I've got little radial cuts here. I'm not going to bend them here while we're on the bench. Well, maybe I'll do one of them, I don't know. You can do this with a pliers. Needle nose might even work. But on the ones on this bottom piece, I'm going to bend them up 90 degrees, but maybe only 1/8 of an inch or so. I'd actually do this on the combine and check to find out how much you need to bend them back in order to clear that line. We want it to have clearance around there, but we don't want a big open hole to leak a lot of air. But the other thing that we do by bending these out is to get a surface that is parallel to the line and not one that's perpendicular to the line. I don't want that edge rubbing against that oil line and potentially abrading it where it would ever perforate it. So we bend these up so that we have a smooth surface of tin. So if it ever touches that line, it's smooth on smooth and it won't bother it. But make sure that this is smooth and that you don't have a sharp or rough edge that could contact that line. But we can do this. If you needed to open them up, you could trim back, cut back in more and bend them out more. But I've started this so you can see what we're doing. And these ones on the flange in here, I would actually bend the other way so that they don't interfere with this piece. They can be bent up, but again, so that they're parallel with that line and don't have any chance of bothering it. Okay, so that's piece number 7. Piece number 8 is this little fill piece. When you get it, of course, it's flat. Looking at this is kind of the reference face. It's you know, you got this wedge shape here and this long thing, and then I've got this wide flange. So looking at this one, I'm going to bend that wide flange up, and I'm going to bend the two narrower, longer flanges down 90 degrees, all 90-degree bends. Two flanges down on this leg and this leg, this wide one bent up. Part number 8 fits right in here. Okay, you might note that I just put a screw through from the inside out, the rest of the screws from the outside in. There are 3 holes here that are designed to be screwed from the inside out. Actually, this one as well, if you can reach it. I don't know if you'll be able to reach it there, but if you can, that one would be from the inside out. These are easier to reach from the inside out. You can kind of go around the edge of the turbocharger exhaust turbine and get them from the inside out. Underneath here, it's a really crowded environment, and it's really hard to get anything in there to put screws in from the bottom. So put them in from the top. Check to make sure they're not hitting something on the underneath there that's important. Okay? That was piece number 8. Piece number 9, 009. The number should be right here, but it's missing in this case. This piece is going to be oriented like this. Notice the little funky cuts on this end of it. You can identify it that way. And I've got these 3/8" flanges here that are perforated. You bend those down away from this face with this thing oriented that way. And this piece is going to screw on here. The screws go from the bottom up on this one, but that's where they go. This is piece number 10. It's probably the most complicated piece to bend in this case, or at least it's one of the more complicated ones. It has flanges all around. First of all, look at this. When it's flat, you'll have this notch here and this notch here, and this is maybe the reference face. And this bottom, I guess this is going to be the bottom for me. That's going to be bent up 90 degrees from this face. So we're going to fold that up like that. That one's easy to do. That one probably isn't a problem. Then I've got a 3/8" flange, or a narrow flange here, that is bent up this way. And so you can bend that one up. Then I've got 2 flanges on the edge, and they have a double bend. So we're going to bend, first thing to do is to bend it back in here, bend it up, bend this one up, and then you have to grip it with one of these tools, this one or the wider one. Get a good tight grip on it and bend this flange back on this forward line, and then you may have to push it or pound it a little bit that way, but we want a 90-degree bend here and a 90-degree bend here. Same thing here, we're going to come 90 degrees out and then 90 degrees over. So it may take you a little bit to get that one shaped that way, because once you bend one, it kind of wants to reverse itself when you do the other one, but you can figure out how to get that bent in that shape. Sometimes you can do it in a bench vise easier, but anyway, so that's the piece. It's got a upward and a back bend here, upward and a back bend here. Bend this up, again with looking at that face. Piece number 10. And piece 10 sits right in here. Okay, piece number 11. Should have an 11 up here on this narrow flange. There's an underscore there, but the number's missing. So we're looking at a rectangular piece with a notch down here. You're going to take that wide bottom flange all the way across here. This is about 2 inch wide. Bend it up 90 degrees. The narrow flange on top is going to bend over or down 90 degrees. So we have a Z-shaped piece when we're done with the notch down here. This is piece number 11. It will fit over the top of this one and underneath this one or behind that one. This is piece number 12. The number should be back here. Should be right there somewhere, either on the inside or the outside. Right, there's an underscore, but the number's missing. This one also has a keyhole cut here to push out, but it's not cut through. I'll have to fix that on this one. The laser didn't quite cut through it, through the metal. So here's your reference face. So you're looking at it here to get the shape. All the flanges in this case bend down away from this face. So you're looking at this face with this, I don't know, panhandle here. This flange goes down 90 degrees. This one goes down 90 degrees. This one goes down 90 degrees. This little piece you could push up, but you really don't need to yet. That'll fit around something when we put it on the machine. So that's piece number 12 bent up. Okay, in this case I can see that I've got two pilot holes that are missing on this one. It means that I missed them somehow in the computer model. It's a kind of a complex model of this whole thing. And I missed those holes, so they didn't get cut by the laser. So I'm going to mark them with a Sharpie, and I'll punch them and drill them in. If you find that you've got a spot like that where you need to make a hole, you can drill a hole with an 1/8 inch drill bit will work if you can do that. Or you can actually shoot one of these screws through. If I center punch this with this automatic punch, the screw will follow that through.
Well, I made another mistake. The part we just screwed on, I had it flipped around the opposite way from the direction that it should have been screwed on. So it's sticking out the back side. The whole thing is sticking the opposite direction from where it ought to be. And I didn't notice it when I was doing it until about 4 parts later when I had to attach something to it. And so rather than undo all of the video that we shot after that and go back, I'm just going to go to we'll come back and pretend that we installed that part later, and there will be a segment in there that shows when I've corrected it, it'll show, we'll just pretend that was the first time we installed that part. You can get it in there, but on the assembly on the machine, you would probably want to do it in the correct order because that piece is easier to get in there on the end when there's nothing else in the way. Anyway, my mistake, I screwed the piece on wrong, and I've cut out the video where I did that. There's no point in watching that, and we'll come back and install that piece later.
I'm going to jump ahead here and put a piece in that's out of order, or at least seems out of order. This piece is marked 19. I'm going to see where your number would be on it. I don't see where that's going to be on it. There should be a number 19 cut in it somewhere. Anyway, number 19. This piece, you can look at it as a very distinct shape. It has two outside flanges, long ones. And this one you can bend easily with the hand tool. This one is, you could do in that bench vise tool if you have one of those. Otherwise you can do it with the long tool as well. Oh, here's the underscore. So there should be a number right here if there was going to be one on the part, right in that long flange. So we're going to bend that long flange looking at the part like this, the side away from these cuts. We're going to bend up 90 degrees. And this flange on the end, we're going to bend up 90 degrees. Then I've got two other flanges here, little narrow ones along this slot. If you can get a hold of this one, with a long tool or pliers or whatever. You want to bend it up a little bit, maybe 45 degrees. This is one we'll probably adjust on the machine. The other one will bend down some. So what that does is opens this slot up a little bit more, makes it easier to slide this in place because it goes around a support of the exhaust system. But I really don't want a big gaping hole there. So we'll put that around there, and then we might even try to tighten these up around that a little bit to limit the amount of air loss there. So one flange up, this one up a little bit, and this one, the one on this edge down a little bit. Piece 19, I'll show you where it goes. This piece, I'm going to slide him on top of this piece and on top of this one. But I'm going to go underneath this one on the end. Now I'm going to shoot a screw in here. I see on this right now when I'm looking at the kit that I have I have some pilot holes that are both the larger size. That means the screw won't bite in there. That's not a big deal in this case because we've got plenty of other ones that'll hold it together around here, but I will try and fix that in the computer model, so hopefully your kit will have a smaller pilot hole in the pieces underneath so you can catch these pieces and pull them together from underneath. Or your screw goes through from on top, it would pull the bottom piece up to it. Some of these screws are designed to go through from the top, and that's because you can reach them easier from the top, and then some of these are easier to get from underneath. And so they're designed, there's an exhaust pipe right here, so you go from underneath. So that's enough screws on that one. That's this tray that goes underneath the exhaust pipe. It's actually piece 19. Now we're going to go back to 13. Okay, we're looking at piece 13. Let's see where the number is. Oh, here it is. The number would be right here. So this piece has 1, 2 flanges on it, and then it has a zigzag bend. Note the configuration here. I've got keyhole here, keyhole here. These again the cut isn't completed. I'll have to fix that. But you should be able to push those keyholes, looking at this face with this zigzag bottom edge here, push those keyholes out just a little bit. And then we have, I can do it this way too, push them up, but then we need to make this bend, so this one goes bent over this way and this one goes, anyway, you get that zigzag bend you see there. Bend this one down and that one up so that we have this flat, down, and flat again with looking at it from this face. The 2 flanges here that are going to be on top get bent away from this reference face. So down that way. This piece helps close up the box here. It'll go right there. Okay, so that's piece number 13. And if you can see it, we've got that's the outer, to me it's the outside of the enclosure. The engine block is back here, and this is, you're standing in the hole putting it on here. Okay, we're coming back to, this is piece number 14. In this tin kit it's 14. I think in some of the others I start this as piece number 1. Anyway, you're looking at the top part of the enclosure. The exhaust manifold will run left to right underneath this thing, from the radiator end to the downstream end of the engine. This is where the air is going to come into the system, into the box. Now there are three bends to make in this, and these are the longest bends in the kit. And again, the laser didn't cut these through on this one, so this was a little bit of a struggle on this one. I did it in that tool on the vise. Actually, I found a sheet metal brake to do this. Yours should have perforated cuts all along here, and it shouldn't be too hard to do either with hand tools or in the vise. But there are 3 bends to make. The first bend I make is this shallow bend here, where I'm bending this flange up. Again, we're looking at the top surface here, and I'm going to bend this whole thing along this line up, but only about 11 degrees. I think the computer model calls for 11 degrees there. And then this long inch-wide flange on the outer side edge, we bend up this way 90 degrees. That's going to bolt against the face of the block, right above the manifold, bolt onto the block. And then we come out a little bit, and then we slope up to give us some space over the turbo, and then we make one more bend here, and this bend is down from this face, so that it should be pretty much parallel to this 1-inch flange along here. So we come out, up, slope 11 degrees, and then bend down or over again, so that this is roughly parallel to that one back here. Again, with the perforated cuts, you can adjust this when you do the assembly pretty easily. With this one, where it didn't cut through, it's a little harder. But you can bend these when you need to make it fit together. Okay. All right, that's that major top piece, and I've put in just a half a dozen or so screws, but you can march almost all the way around this. You might leave this one out for now. We might need that later, but you can go all the way around it. And as you put screws in, the next one will line up. And again, the screws will help pull this together if your bend angles aren't perfect. But anyway, we now have most of the enclosure complete. But we have an exhaust pipe riser that's going to come up here to the diesel oxidation catalyst, and we haven't covered that up yet. So we got a couple pieces to do that. Okay, this is piece number 15. 15 would be in this flange right down here. Again, it'll be a flat part for you, but I've got fingers on this side, and I've got this one has no perforations here, so that can help orient you so that we don't get it flipped around. So you've got a tab here that has no perforations. That one doesn't get bent, it goes down along the side. These others have perforations, and we're looking at it like this. So you're going to bend this one down about 45, down about 45, 45, and 45, so you get kind of an octagon-shaped enclosure, like that. And it'll wrap around the exhaust riser that comes up to the diesel oxidation catalyst. Each of these 4 flanges gets bent out, but they don't get bent out 90. They get bent out kind of like this so that they fit in a plane, all in one line. They're going to fit onto a flat surface. So that's how those are the bends in part 15. These fingers up here, you will bend, when you put it on the machine, you'll bend them to fit up against the diesel oxidation can. I don't know exactly where that's going to be right now. You'll have to bend these out, but they'll fit tight then up against that can. We don't bend them now. Okay, I told you I made a mistake earlier when I put this on. I drilled the holes in the right place, but I screwed it on the wrong side of the piece, wrong side of the assembly. So I've taken this piece off. It's number 12. It's kind of the right-hand end of our enclosure. And I'll show you how to slip it in there. Now you shouldn't have this problem if you've done it in the right order. I'm doing it out of order. But we can slip this in where this tab goes behind here, but this side goes inside of this thing, like that. And then we can slip it down in place and slip it underneath the top here. And I'll put a screw in through the top first to hold it in place. Now I'll come back and put piece number 15 on again. Okay, I have piece 16 here. 16 is going to be an odd-shaped piece. It's got finger cuts up here and a large center reference face here with a cutout on this side. So there's your reference. We're going to bend this wide flange down about 90 degrees, this wide flange down 90 degrees. Leave these fingers alone for now. They'll spread when we have to go around the diesel exhaust catalyst. These smaller flanges on this side, we're going to bend back out 90 degrees so that they'll come up against a face here. So that's piece number 16. Here's your reference face with the notch down here on this side. Sides bend down, flanges on the side bend out. Piece 16, oh, one more flange, I'm sorry, I missed one. The one on the bottom here bends underneath to the point where it lines up with this edge. The angle will line up with that. Now when we put it together, that flange will go on the bottom, and this whole piece will fit up against what I call the inside face, piece number 13 here. Okay, we have that in place. I'll put one in the bottom too. Okay, I'm going to point out on this end, this is going to be the far right-hand end of the exhaust system, and it's kind of hard to reach some of these. You may not be able to get screws in all of these when you do the assembly on the machine, but there's lots of holes there. Tap them all now so that you have lots of options available on the machine. Okay, this little piece, number 17, we have a 17 here, has a wide flange, and then this tapered reference face. If you're looking at that tapered reference face, like this, the wide flange goes down, the narrow flange, the 1-inch wide flange goes up, and that piece will fit fit right there. The reason it's there is because you've got a sensor line that comes out of here, and this is a way to fit around it and then fill it in. We'll see that when we get on the machine to do the installation.
One more correction or clarification to make. The piece we just screwed on, a little kind of a Z-shaped fill-in piece, is going to probably have to be cut or trimmed or opened to allow a sensor line or a pair of sensor lines to come out of the enclosure. Those sensor lines go into the exhaust system, probably a temperature sensor or a NOx sensor. Anyway, they have to be able to exit the thing and stay safe. And so I cut a big enough opening in the parts so that it's easy to get them through there or to go around them. But then this filler piece can be cut or trimmed so that it fits close around those sensor lines. But you want to bend some little flower petal cuts from wherever that line penetrates that little fill-in piece, so that there's parallel surfaces along that, and rather than perpendicular cuts in the tin. I don't want the sharp edge of a tin resting against or touching that sensor line. So if this sensor line ever is going to contact the tin because it vibrates, or the tin vibrates or whatever, we want it to vibrate against a flat surface. So you bend little pieces around to fit around that sensor line. So you may need to modify that filler piece, but then you can screw it on around that, wherever that sensor line comes through it. There's also, we discussed in the following clips, that place where the pneumatic sensor leaves pneumatic actuator line leaves the turbocharger, and that's where that little circular filler piece comes into play, or could come into play if you need it. Okay, back to the video.
Okay, that's the tin assembly for a 9240 or 9250 combine. Up here on top, you've got what looks like a muffler on the machine, and that's the diesel exhaust catalyst. And we want to try and keep this system as tight up to that as we can, so that we don't lose a lot of air before that, and we can force air to come up around underneath that and keep sparks or keep dust from getting at the pipe inside here, because this pipe inside here is very hot all the way up to that diesel oxidation catalyst. Then it cools down inside there. One of the things I'd recommend you do when you get it to this point and you put in all these screws all around here, come around with some different colored Sharpie markers. And every place you've got a junction here, make some marks so that you can line those up when you're putting it together on the machine. In case you have doubts about which part lies inside or outside, you can, I've got one reversed here. This should actually be, I've got the inside as the outside. I can see that by the size of the pilot holes, but I didn't put screws in here. But I'd correct that now, and then I'd make some lines there so that when I'm assembling it on the machine, you can tell where you've been and which pieces go on top. So, for instance, here, there, whatever you need to do to make notes for yourself on the machine, or when you get on the machine. One other thing, there's a sensor line, or there's a pneumatic actuator that controls the turbocharger geometry that will come out of here. We might need to open up that hole a little bit and again bend those pieces so that they parallel. It's a rubber line that goes to a vacuum actuator or a pressure actuator. Anyway, so that's one where we may need some adjustments, and then again we may need adjustments around those turbocharger oil lines. Okay, when we get on the combine, I'll also show you how to install the air intake here, the discharge, so that we dump air into this point, but we won't do that at this point on the bench. So that's the tin assembly for a 9240 or 9250 combine. Be sure you put all the screws in so that they're ready to go when you get on the machine, and then you can take the whole kit apart if you want to. Or you can take it apart on the machine and put it right back together piece by piece as well. Okay, hope you have a safe harvest. Be sure and watch for smolders and fires on your machine, even though this should reduce those dramatically. And I hope that you're happy with the way that it does its job. Thanks very much.